guys? It's Seth back with another Defense Win Fantasy, a Fantasyholics Podcast Network station, if you will, coming in for another week. Listen, Thanksgiving is behind us. It is now to the point of no return. You're either in two situations at this point if you're talking about a Dynasty IDP league. You're prepping to go into war, try to win a championship, or you're trying to figure out what you're going to do for yourself and for next year. So we've got you covered today. We're going to talk about some pickups that either A, probably aren't going to do much this year, but they've got some potential going into next year, or B, they're going to help you get a little bit further along in your IDP championship quest. So we're going to start off with some edge rushers. And we're going to start nowhere else but for the Buffalo Bills. Big issue happened in Buffalo this past week. Von Miller got a knee injury. Possibly season ending, at least fantasy-wise, he's not going to come back. They're going to make sure he's right for the playoffs, if anything. But, so, cross him off the list. And then A.J. Epenesa's got an ankle injury that continues to linger on. So we got to start looking at what is going to happen with that team. Where are they going to get some pressures from? Now, Greg Rousseau is expected to return after missing 3 weeks. But that being said, there's still some availability out there. And that leads you to two people, Shaq Lawson and Carlos Basham. Now, Basham, I'm feeling is more of a let's hang on to him and maybe we see something in the future kind of guy. Granted, Miller is under a long contract, and Rousseau has proven that he's the dude this year. But Boogie Basham is still a second-round draft capital in his second year. And last week he had 53 snaps. Granted, he had no stats in those 53 snaps. Not great, not a good sign. But they trust him enough to have him on the field. They weren't rotating him out that much. And then Shaq Lawson had a tackle for loss, but he had 49 snaps. So once again, both were pretty ineffective, but the volume is there. And that's something to at least pay attention to. They're playing again tonight against New England. I wouldn't start either of them, especially if you're on the borderline. But it's an interesting look to see where they are with the snap counts. With Rousseau back, see where Boogie and Shaq fall into the ranks. Once again, Shaq's an older guy, older vet. You might be able to get some boom plays from him coming at the end of the year if you're going for the playoff push. And then Carlos Basham, I think, is a guy that you really are going to look at the end of this year and see if he's somebody that's worth keeping going forward. It's kind of a make it or break it for him. He's not made the stats this year to make you feel good about if you're going to keep him, if you're cutting down your rosters in a dynasty, or you got to make way for some new rookies coming in next year. Now is the time to see if he can take that next step and be valuable. Looking into Detroit for some edge rush help, you got John Kaminsky and James Houston. Kaminsky saw a lot of snaps in Thanksgiving Day. He was at 63, I think, and he had a lot of pressures there. Not a lot of production, but he's getting to the quarterback. He's just not making it full. And they did credit him with 2 QB hits, so you'll get that. But you're not getting the fantasy aspect of that in most scoring leagues. But you look at the pressures and you look at the hits and you know that he's close but no cigar, but there's the opportunity. He's getting there. That's the key. He's getting there. It's kind of like targets when you're talking about wide receivers. They're getting the pressures and they're getting the hits, then the opportunity to get the points is not far behind. But in normal fantasy scoring, he only had 2 tackles and a pass defended. So there's an issue because he is wearing almost like a club because he hurt his thumb. That's been a while, but he's got a club on it. So that might be also part of why he's not getting the official sacks. But the pressures are there, and it's a guy that is worth grabbing. I think a little bit longer of a hold on this guy. And then you got James Houston. He didn't play much at all, but he still managed 2 sacks. I mean, he had 5 snaps and got 2 sacks. He's a 6th rounder. He's not a guy that had a big time draft capital, but he's going to get a longer look. You get to the quarterback and you make the tackle, you get the sacks, so you're going to get an opportunity to kind of take a look and see what you have. Especially with Detroit, who's not necessarily going to be a playoff contender, but they want to see what they have going into next year. I expect James Houston to be a guy at the end of this year that you might be ending up playing. So his stat line is a little shocking. I doubt he got picked up because the snap percentage is so low. But grab him. Throw him on your bench. Like he said, we're not to the playoffs yet. We're not in playoff season. Hang on to him, because if he all of a sudden gets a lot more attempts or snaps on defense and he's becoming the dude, you already got him for cheap and you're not having to overpay when nobody has any money left here at the end of the year. The next player I want to talk about is Justin Hollins. He was on the Rams. He got waived. And then he immediately signed with Green Bay because they lost Rashawn Gary, who was having a heck of a year. They've got Preston Smith, and they've got rookie Kingsley Ngabara. But, I mean, Hollins could step in to a solid role for the rest of this year. He's also going to be a free agent at the end of the year, obviously. So, he needs to get the job done. He can't just be a guy if he wants to get paid this offseason. And in his first game, what did he do? He got a sack on one of the most elusive quarterbacks in the NFL right now, Jalen Hurts. And had a couple tackles for loss. Grab Justin Hollins for the playoff push here. He's going to give you the opportunity to play him. Now we start looking at some of the interior defensive linemen. One guy that, it was one of those, hey, hi, I'm still here kind of situations. That was Malik Collins, playing for Houston after playing for the Cowboys. Malik Collins came into the game against Miami and got 2 sacks and 4 solo tackles. 3 of those were for loss, if that matters for your scoring system. Now, I think it's a tough thing to do to say, yeah, let's put him in the starting lineup. He's been getting pressures. They're playing Cleveland, which means he can go after Deshaun Watson, and it's been a good matchup for D tackles. And he's going to see a lot of snaps in this game. I'm not saying that he's going to be a long-term answer if you're a team that's in rebuild. But if you play interior linemen, if you're playing D-line, I wouldn't even be having this conversation. But if you do play D tackles, like interior defensive lineman situation, it's interesting to look at. Maybe they've turned the corner a little bit. But when he got the 2 sacks against Miami, it was after both right and left tackle left the game. They were playing the backup quarterback. There's a lot there that needs to be understood. But interior defensive linemen that get sacks are very hard to find. So it's worth at least keeping an eye on. I wouldn't say pick him up and put him on your roster unless you're pretty desperate. But he's at least worth somebody to keep an eye on. And then you got John Ridgeway out of Washington. This is one that's a little bit more of an interesting situation because you've got Daron Payne playing out his rookie contract right now. Ridgeway is a guy that is just going to take up space, and he's played a lot better down the stretch. He's made some impressive plays. He had a fumble against Dallas Goedert. He saw a season-high 31 snaps against Atlanta, and where he had 3 assisted tackles there. At this point, he's not much more than a depth option, but in defensive tackle-led leagues, if you're out of the running, this is a guy that could take over the entire role if the Commanders do not bring back Deron Payne. Either way, they're getting much more and more trust with him, and if he's going to be playing with Payne, he's going to have more and more opportunity to make big plays. Either way, if you, like I said, this is not one for trying to win the championship. This is for one that trying to do the rebuild, trying to get some of these guys cheaper before the offseason starts and people start moving around, and all of a sudden this guy's a starter and you already have him for cheap at the end of this year because you got, what? If you're not making the playoffs, your team's not very good. So you probably have some people you can cut bait and move on with. Now, off-ball linebackers, we're going to go back to Buffalo. Now, I talked about this guy when he got traded from Baltimore to Chicago, that he was not going to be relevant in Chicago. That Jack Sanborn was the guy to own. And what has Jack Sanborn did since he took over that role? I don't know. Been a top 5 linebacker every week. Which, by the way, Roquan Smith is been killing your team right now. Baltimore is just not scheming him in yet. And maybe it's not going to be for the rest of this year until they figure out. But he's also a free agent. But it tells me that Chicago has a system that the linebacker works on. But I digress. We're not here to talk about Jack Sanborn. We're here to talk about A.J. Klein. He came in, and the week before, Terrell Dodson was playing in this role. And then just Dodson basically said, nah, you take it, Klein. And Klein comes in off the street, essentially, for 6 solo tackles, 3 assisted, on 71 defensive snaps. Nobody was playing Klein. So everybody's running to the waiver wire to grab Klein. I wouldn't do that. Tremaine Edmonds should be coming back from a groin injury. So if you have Edmonds, or if you are a contender, I'm not saying you play A.J. Klein, but he's a depth piece that shows that he can produce if Tremaine Edmonds has a step back. Plus, a lot of the Bills players have been sick. Granted, it's a little late to figure out this week. Maybe that illness continues into next week. But either way, A.J. Klein is the clear backup for a groin injury Edmonds. And that's an easy re-aggravation that you might be able to pick up and grab Klein. Granted, he had a solid game, so will he be out there? My guess is still yes. So if you're in rebuild mode, don't bother. He's only a chess piece at this point for a contender that needs to make sure that they have some depth at linebacker. And then you have Jalen Reeves-Maybin, who had a career season last year in Detroit. I mean, everybody that plays defense for Detroit has an opportunity to make tackles because they're on defense a lot. But he came to Houston. He got completely lost in the linebacker room, but Camus Gruger-Hill asked for his release and got it, and now is in Arizona. And now Christian Harris left last game with a shoulder injury. And so Jalen came in, had 6 tackles, 4 solo on 51 snaps. At this point in time, it's another kind of situation where Harris can't go. Jalen's a guy to play. Again, even though he's got some... Here's the thing about them. Houston is in a massive overhaul rebuild situation. They've got draft picks from trading Deshaun Watson. Jalen is a guy that if they like what they've seen, they brought him in last year after having a good year. And Christian Kirksey is still not under contract after this year. So if they decide to move on from Kirksey and they don't draft anybody, then Maybin is going to be the guy next to Christian Harris. And all all accounts point to Lovie Smith still being there next year, rebuilding this team, and they have two talented linebackers that normally produce. So if Christian Kirksey's gone and Jalen Reeves-Maben is in, you can book it. So if you are in a rebuild and you just need to find a diamond in the rough, well, settle up, Jafar. This might be your guy. But it's a stretch. But once again, I'd rather have this guy than a 32, 33-year-old linebacker. And heck, if you can trade somebody to a contender before the playoffs start and grab a guy like this and then watch the draft, and if they draft somebody, then grab one of them in your rookie draft, then cover your bases. Few other people to talk about as far as stash and dynasty goes. Damon Clark for Dallas. He was a rookie out of LSU, if you don't know the name. He had 46 snaps, which was a season high for him on Thanksgiving, because Anthony Barr is sidelined. And he had 6 tackles and a forced fumble. Barr and Leighton Vander Esch, both in contract years. They haven't really been super sold on Leighton Vander Esch. Barr is at the end of his career trying to get a ring. And Damon Clark and Jabril Cox could be big-time role players in 2023. So, another stash guy. For New Orleans, a guy that you can grab for a championship run, Caden Ellis. He's linebacker 1, and he is 100%. You start him if you got him until Pete Werner returns from injury, which Werner's been out for 3 weeks, and what has Caden Ellis done? Performed. He had 12 solo tackles and 2 assisted this last Sunday. And he's getting to the quarterback. He's had a sack in the previous games. Caden Ellis, if you're trying to win a championship, and he's still out there, pick him up. And then finally, Chad Muma is one that I think more of if you're going to be rebuilding. Rookie for the Jacksonville Jaguars, Devin Lloyd is the high-pressed rookie there. But Chad Muma's been taking snaps from Lloyd. Foyose Olokin is still the dude, but Lloyd has seen that rookie drop-off, and Muma's kind of came in and started to take care of some of that. And if you didn't get Lloyd on draft day and Muma's out there, time to buy low on him and see where he goes in the postseason and into the going into this offseason next year. Now moving on to safeties. We have Reed Blankenship, which is essentially a Chauncey Gardner-Johnson replacement. This one is one I want to grab. I don't want to play because Gardner-Johnson's had a lot of interceptions, and that's boosted up his ability to show value. And I say that as Reed Blankenship had an interception against Aaron Rodgers, along with 3 solo tackles and 3 assisted. So he has that playmaking ability. But there might be some other guys that I'd be willing to play. But if I'm playoff bound and I'm working on that, this is a guy that I feel good about. But even if you're not, Gardner Johnson is in a contract year. That's why he was traded from the Saints. They wanted to get something out of him. The Eagles haven't re-signed him. Who knows if Hurts is going to have contract situations coming up. This team is made to win now, and they're going to lose pieces. I don't know if Gardner Johnson's going to be one of those pieces, but it's worth grabbing Reed Blankenship in order to secure a safety of the future on this defense, which has been profitable as far as fantasy points are concerned. And then you got Chicago. Now, this is strictly for a championship kind of run guy. That's DeAndre Houston Carson. Jaquan Brisker had a concussion, so he's out at least short term. Maybe could be back by this, but they did lose Eddie Jackson to a foot injury. And his backup, Dane Cruikshank, to a hamstring injury. So, if Eddie Jackson, which he's out, it's now time for Houston Carson to get some opportunity. Long term, not gonna be there because he's third or fourth on the depth chart. But you need somebody, you got him, and you can play him now. Another safety to look at, Tampa Bay's Keanu Neal. This dude was a stud his first 2 years in the NFL, if people have forgotten, for the Atlanta Falcons. Then he got banged up. But now he's a solid backup safety on your fantasy team. With Winfield and Edwards both healthy right now, Neal's been productive because he's playing box nickel safety role, and it's worth looking at as a safety 2/3 kind of consideration. I mean, he had 8 combined tackles, 4 solo, and a half sack with 2 quarterback hits against the Browns. So he's getting to the quarterback. He's getting the opportunity to continue to make plays. As a team looking for the future, not looking at the future, but looking for the playoffs, Keanu Neal could be a guy that helps you get there, especially with all the safety injuries we've been having lately. Now, looking at, there's a few other people that you can talk about, I guess. Jason Pennick, I'm not a big fan of him. He's New York Giants. I think that there's a better opportunity with some of the guys I've already talked about. Taylor Rapp's another one. But, man, the safeties have been just untrustworthy for the Rams this year. But Rapp's getting work in the box, but that team is just so rough. But that being said, he had 7 solo, 5 assisted tackles against Kansas City. And he's been averaging almost 8 total tackles since the bye week of week 7. So, maybe that one I'm talking myself into as I review his stats now. Taylor Rapp is probably somebody I'd at least want to have on my roster. Now we go into the cornerbacks. Let's start with the New England Patriots. Got the Bills this week. They still play the pass-happy Dolphins down the stretch. You got Jonathan Jones, and Jalen Mills are both viable plays if you've got cornerback eligibility. Jones has been quietly being real solid. In this last week, he had 7 tackles, 6 of those solo, a pick, and 3 passes defended. He seems to be that J.C. Jackson kind of guy that this year, at least, for the Patriots. Jalen Mills is a little bit more inconsistent, but has the opportunity, especially with how bad Josh Allen's been throwing the ball lately. He's got the opportunity for picks coming up too. But by the time you're listening to this, that game's going to be over, and I'm either a savant or an idiot. So we'll find out, I guess. But then you also have, if you're looking into the same division, with the New York Jets, with Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed pretty much rostered in all quarterback-required leagues. Carter's the Jets' nickel defender, which makes him a good streaming option because of tackles. And hangs on to, you can kind of keep him. He's been solid the last few years. He's been nice. And if you have an issue with DJ Reed or Sauce Gardner, you have the opportunity. He's still going to get more snaps. So if there is an injury that occurs in the game, he still is going to be on the field and possibly getting more targets towards him. And then as a guy that is maybe a stash for the future is Darren Hall for the Atlanta Falcons. He was a 4th-round pick in 2021. He'd be playing opposite A.J. Terrell, which he has for the past few weeks, I think 6 weeks or so. He's been playing solid, and he's been productive for a few weeks here in a row. And he gets to play against Kenny Pickett a lot this weekend. So it's worth looking at. I like him for a long term. I could even like him for a short term. Anytime you play across from a shutdown corner like A.J. Terrell, you have the opportunity to get more balls thrown your way because they just don't want to throw towards A.J. Terrell. He's got his guy on lockdown. So Darren Hall, I like him more for a long term if the cards play itself right. But if you are in a pinch and you are needing a guy for a big-time run, pick him up. Let's see what happens. Like I said, he's got Kenny Picks-a-Lot this week, and then in championship week, he has they host Arizona, so Kyler Murray might be throwing it his way as well. So that's what we've got for tonight. Kind of give you a little bit of going this way or that way because not everybody's striving for a championship at this point in time, and that's okay. That happens. But that doesn't mean that the season's over. Doesn't mean that next season's over. It's just starting. You got to do your research. You got to maintain your focus on players at the end of the year to help build your championship team for next year. So, with that being said, I want to remind you all to have a great Thursday night football game. Hopefully, it was everything you hoped for. And once again, defense wins fantasy. We'll see you next week.